I hated doing plumbing, and I hated doing drafting. So what I started to do was find leaks where no one else can find them. And I started walking through buildings, really good buildings with great building engineers and great consulting engineers, and they call me up and say, we can't figure out why consumption doubled. It doubled. One day it just doubled, and we've been looking at it, we can't figure. And that became my thing, figuring that out. So I have a thing, it's called reduce water usage through submetering. It's not true. You can put as many water meters on your building, it will not reduce consumption. I promise you, it won't do anything. But the data will help you solve all kinds of leaks. And if you want to know what the ROI on these type of things are, it's crazy. You know, most buildings see an ROI in 2 months because you're not using that device to reduce consumption. Everything else is now starting to work and make sense. Everything else that you spent money on. And I work for Ashokan, but we created a product called AquaSync. We do not have a physical product. It's just a portal that helps other people in our business monitor consumption. First thing I wanted to talk about is water for just a minute. Everybody, how many of you are in charge of energy? Is anybody, and you're in charge of water also? A lot of people started off doing sustainability, global climate change, and they took that hat that they thought of as energy, and they said, let's apply it to water. Because that's the mindset. That's 80% of what they're doing. And water is not energy. It acts differently. Number one, eventually we're going to run out of fossil fuels. We will not run out of water, hopefully. We can live within our means. Whatever we want to do in fossil fuel, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, there's not going to be any fossil fuel left. But with evapotranspiration, which we learned in high school, the rain keeps coming down, there could be enough water. So we can live within our means. We just have to watch what we're doing. So that's a different change. Number two, global climate change. We all hear about this. Whatever you want to think about it, it's changing. And what's fascinating is there's winners and losers. There are probably no winners when it comes to fuel. But when it comes to water, there's winners. The Northeast, it hasn't stopped raining since 2000. The problem in the Northeast is we got floods all over the place. But having enough water is not a big problem in a lot of places, except occasionally when it decides not to rain. And if you start speaking to town supervisors and commissioners and DEP, we're not worried about water in the Northeast. On the West Coast, they're having a nervous breakdown. So it really depends where you are. And before you're spending resources, you really should sit down and say, am I saving the planet? I may be saving a lot of money, but I might not be saving the planet if my town has more than enough water. New York City, the reservoirs have been full since 2000. This year we had a problem that was man-made because the city dumped their reservoirs for flood control. I can get into it, it's a long story. But really, before you jump into this, and I'm the guy selling water conservation, it might just be about money and not saving the universe. And there are a lot of losers and there's winners. And I think in Chile, there's areas that are now agriculturally booming that couldn't grow anything for 40 years. The climate's changed. It's raining where it never rained before. Here's another thing. How many of you have done a conservation, an energy conservation project, expecting $4 gasoline or $5 gasoline? I remember back in the Carter administration, everybody under Carter was spending a lot of money for energy conservation, and then you see water drop on you. Has anybody seen, the price of energy drop? Energy goes up, and you figure that's what I'm basing my project on, and then it dives. Well, the good news about water, and water is that line that moves slowly, it's not a commodity. Everybody assumes water is a commodity. Well, if your town had a drought, anybody suffer a drought in their area? Did the price of water go up when the drought hit? No. If it was fuel and there wasn't enough, the price would jump. In New York, we have tons of water and the price hasn't come down because you really don't pay for that water. It's set by some town, some regulation. You're not paying for the water, you're paying for the transit, you're paying for the people in the town. You might be paying for pumping, so there's an energy component which could be connected to energy. Generally, the costs are labor, medical for the town, and construction costs. None of those go down. Good news, if you're putting money into water, don't expect the prices to soar, but don't worry that tomorrow morning the price of water is going to drop. It hasn't happened. So you can go ahead and say, I'm going to spend money on water, and I could figure out more or less what the rates are going to go up 3 to 10%, and it's going to keep on going unless something happens politically. And, who knows where that could go, but you can really count on this. So, that said, water's not energy, and here's the big thing. Energy. You buy better equipment. It generally, electric and gas don't leak. If they do, you usually find out about it. Water, don't change your equipment. Just make sure there are no leaks. And that's where metering comes into it. So you can get a building, and everybody's running around. They put in 1.6 gallon toilets in the 90s, and now they want to go down to 0.8, 1 point. You're going to see minor savings. You want the big saving, make sure that toilet flapper is replaced. It's the leaks. And not when we think leaks, we think water pouring down from this. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a ball cock on a cooling tower. We're talking about little things going wrong. A water fountain where the overflow is set wrong. And I'm going to get into these type of things. But approach water slightly differently than energy. Approach it from, I can know what my costs are going to be, and I don't have to replace everything. I just have to monitor and maintain, which is what we're really pretty good at. That's what we do. And it's nice to be able to do it without huge costs associated with things, like replacing big pieces of equipment. So, why sub-meter? My office thought that was a cute cartoon. I don't know where they got the picture from, but somebody's going to get fired. And I don't have a blue dog. The leak detection, that's the best picture. Number one reason to sub-meter is find the leaks. Number two, hey, if you got somebody you could pass the bill on, get it off your back. Do any of you have any retail space in your building? Does anybody Do anybody have any space that you could pass on the bill to somebody else besides CAM charges? Your tenants do not care. If they're not paying for water, let me ask you, you said that you have retail space. Does your staff take care of that retail space, fix leaks in the space? That's unusual. Usually we hear, yeah, I've got this supermarket on the first floor of my office building, and it's their problem. They have to fix their plumbing. And I said, and who's paying for the water? Oh, we pay for the water, but I'm not going to fix it. It's your water. Give them a meter. When we put a meter in a store, I get a phone call from the owner 6 months later, and he says, hey, they're not using any water. I said, yes, but they were the day before. Look at your bill, it's dropped. So the one thing you really want to do is give them a meter no matter what. I saw a tailor in a lousy building who I went into his space and he said, I have no bathroom. I use the community bathroom. I said, great, but there used to be a bathroom. He said, yeah, go in that room. And he's got material piled up. So we took all the material out. I said, how long has it been like this? He goes, I don't know, 40 years? I've been here since I'm a kid. We took it out. There was no flapper on the toilet. We just cut the line. We shut it. And this building's consumption went down $40,000. And the guy's been doing this since ever. And if you ask him, he never used water. And this is the extreme case. You put a meter on it, people solve the problem. They figure out how to use a toilet neck down the block. They'll do anything. So that's number 2. And the number 3 reason people submeter is you're doing this great big project and you're telling somebody, I want to replace a chiller, a piece of equipment. You want to know the ROI. If you wait to put the meter in till after the project and you got to go back to your boss and you got $1 million water bill and you just did a job that saved $100,000, are you going to be able to know it? We did some jobs in some major hospitals, and they didn't track the ROI on the job, on their piece of equipment they're changing, and they did a research lab that was using tremendous amount of water for ROI. So their savings that they went to their boss with all of a sudden disappeared. But it disappeared to another part of the project, and now you can't get credit. So that's the other reason to jump into submetering. Again, leak detection, building tenants, ROI. We're getting more of that with buildings going for LEED, green building projects, etc. Now, let's talk about meters, and I put everything up here. The simplest meter is a displacement meter. And you can pass this one around. This one's made by Neptune. If you look at it, you won't see on a lot of these new ones, you won't see a read. And you'll call the plumber and say, come back and give me a new meter. The reason the meter's not working, they new ones come with a solar panel or something. They're trying their batteries in here, and they really want to get 20 years out of the battery. Non-replaceable batteries if you're paying for these things. So this is basically this meter, the water comes in, goes out the other side, and it goes through, if you imagined a cup moving around or an oscillating disc, it's great for measuring low flow. Put it on a high-speed item, and your accuracy drops. So it's really good for a private home. And that's where you're seeing most of these. And if anybody wants to pass them around, it's a little heavy. The next type of meter coming down is a turbine. And I don't have one here. A turbine meter, inside there's a little propeller, kind of like that one you had when you were a kid that you blew at. That little thing you blew, the pinwheel. And if you remember as a kid, if you didn't blow hard, it didn't move. So you buy a turbine, and if you look at the low flow, 1 gallon per minute, that propeller is not moving. And if it's a big one, it might be 4 gallons a minute. That means you can have a 4-gallon going and going and going, you'll never notice. So companies came out with the compound meter. It's really a displacement and a turbine in one body. And they became very popular in the 60s, 70s, more in the 80s and 90s. Problem is, they're complicated, they break, and they're expensive. And you don't know, some of them have one head that both heads come together. What's important is you're now reading 2 heads, and the thing is not very accurate. I would stay away from ever using it. Then they came out with single jet meters, everybody, which is a little heavier. And if you've got one of these, this is made by Metron. They were here at the show, and And the meter, it's a little heavy. It necks down. It's very accurate at high and low flow, and therefore towns are pushing it, people are pushing it. It's heavy, it's expensive, and it necks down. So if you put this on a very fast pump, you'll hear a whistling sound that'll drive you crazy. And if you ask the manufacturer, they'll say no such a thing happens, but I've replaced a few. Now, in most cases, this is fine. Just don't put it on a high-speed pump. The meters come usually with a touchpad. And this touchpad, you can buy a device from the manufacturer to read it. So if you want to put this in the ceiling, you can, but you got to buy the device, right? Most manufacturers make something that you could read it on the wall. Not the best thing, but this is the way most meters come, with a little touchpad. I don't know if you want to pass it around. It's a little heavy. See, don't press the thing. I didn't realize I did that. So that gets us to, that's the single jet, and then they make these sonic meters. Everybody loved the sonic meters. Badger makes one. They're here at the show. A lot of people are buying Onacon. What they came with is two little strap-on devices, and it measures the speed of the water with a sonic wave. So, great. Who likes these things? Electrical engineers love specifying it. Why? Because they're scared of water. Don't cut the pipe. I don't know how to do that. I'm a plumber. I'd rather cut the pipe and put a meter in any time than that. Now, the industry is moving to really, here's an interesting one. This is the same thing, but they built all that stuff into the meter. And if you look through it, you don't see a damn thing, and you say, there's nothing, it left the parts out. This is really a little heavier. But if you look through it, it looks like these meters are extraordinarily accurate. Extraordinarily. And you can get it down to very, very low flow. What is the problem with this meter? One, it has a battery, and it's expensive, and the battery, you want to talk to your manufacturer. Is it replaceable, and how much does it cost? This one is 10 years. It's made by Elster. The life on the battery. I'll talk about how to read it in a minute. So far we've been, what is the other? It's expensive. It's nice that the flanges move, so if you screw things up, you could really, if your pipes are, if the guy soldered the other flange a little off, you can move this one. It's really very easy. And then this is a cheap version of that. And this is another version. This one don't touch. I don't care if you touch it. It's just got goo on it. It's a sonic meter, and they make a lot. All these come with a little gel that you have to put on it. Just like when you get a sonogram. Anybody gone for a sonogram? They put that gel on your chest and they clean it off. Well, you got to put it in, not on the one going around, but the ones that strap onto a pipe. And when that gel dries out, might take 5 years, all of a sudden your reads are going wacky. And if you call the manufacturer, it'll tell you it's no problem. There's about 30 different models out there. So if you want to pass it around, but just don't touch the bottom and it's not a problem. You can wipe it off. It's medical grade. Then companies are now coming out with really cheap sonic meters. When I say cheap, this is 1 inch, but you're probably in the $100 to $200 range, depending where you're buying them. Now that we've done talking basically about meters, how do you read these meters? Well, let's go back. I want to just talk, who's got a BMS system in their building? Probably everybody, most people. And you're reading a lot of equipment. and it's all pulse equipment, if I'm correct. Which means there's a pulse on a motor and another pulse, and you could see the speed, etc. Pulses are really, really good for reading something moving, but not necessarily for something encoded, something where you want a totalizer, because you're measuring a pulse on a device, on a motor, and that line gets cut. Well, you don't notice it. Then somebody fixes it, and now if all you care about is the speed of the motor, that doesn't make a difference. Meters are primarily made by companies that want to sell to utilities which want to meter water in people's buildings. You don't want a homeowner in a town cutting the line, reconnecting it, and you don't know how many pulses went by. So, what's the solution? Most of the companies came out with encoded meters. And I think American Water Works now, all their meters are encoded. This is a tremendous challenge for you. If you want to read most water meters in the United States and Canada, this is not true in Mexico, but AWWA has encoded meters. That means the meter reads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It sends a signal, a date stamp, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 10 minutes later, it reads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. It sends that entire number. So if you cut the line for a month, when you reconnect it, you're getting the number. It's great, but how does your BMS handle that? And that's a real problem. So a bunch of the meter manufacturers all make a device to read their meter. Again, any one of these meters, the manufacturer's making a device to read it, even though it's encoded, and you can get that read, and if you subscribe to that company portal, you'll be able to see your read at very minimal cost, right? And you can read any of these meters with the devices. This is a transmitter by Badger. It's mostly battery and a transmitter inside, and it will read all Badger meters. And it will read some other meters also. This is a meter by Metron, the other one going around. This is an old one. It's not their new thing. And it'll read their meter and transmit the data. And if you call Metron, they're at the show, as is Badger. They're both here. They will tell you how you can get the data out of their transmitter. And this is a New York City, it says DEP on it, made by Aclara, and it will read all meters, except Aclara doesn't like to sell this to you. They only want to sell it to municipalities. They don't want to talk about an order under 10,000, and I don't think you have 10,000 meters. They're difficult, and they want to put their transmitters on a tower. So if you have 10 buildings in Baltimore and you don't own a tower, you have a problem. These are cell phone. This is cell phone based, this is drive-by. So there's different products out there, and they will allow you to read that meter. Now, so you put a bunch of submeters in your building, right? You put one, and I'll go through where you put them, and then I'll get to this. Where do I recommend you put them? We get customers, and they say, put them everywhere. Put them on every sink. So we did one Chelsea Market in New York for Google. Every bathroom has a meter. We have 160 meters in the building. Most clients are not interested in spending for 160 meters. If they are, God bless them. I put in meters. I got to pay for my children's education. But where do I recommend you put them? Number one, single pass water equipment. I say get rid of this equipment, but if you have anything that's single pass, such as refrigeration is the number one thing. Where do we see this? We see this in hard to reach places where there's no vent. Somebody buys Tecumseh, there's a bunch of companies, they make these little packaged units. They have a little teeny 3/8 line, maybe even a smaller line. Cold water in, warm water out, cools the thing down. You have no idea how much water these things use. These little, and they'll put 10 of them in. And then you call the service guy to fix the thing, and you tell him, hey, the beer in the kitchen's not cold enough. What does he do? He opens up the solenoid valve all the way, and now the beer's cold, and you're now using $100,000 a year to cool your beer. And I don't care how much you're selling, you're not making your money back on it. My solution, I can't change the world. If I put a meter on it and I present management with the data, they're going to get rid of the unit. Or they'll keep telling the service rep not to play with the valve. So that's my number one. Number two, irrigation. Anybody have irrigation on their areas? How many heads do you have?
Oh, it's 2,000.
2,000 heads. What does it run you a year?
I don't know.
Is it off a well?
No.
Okay. If you sit down and figure, these are for grass, or if you figure out, I think you run about 15 to 30 minutes at 2.5 gallons. If you figure out your cost, your head will spin. And if you figure out your cost, add up all the heads, add up how much it uses, and then find out your bill, and you'll go, wait, how am I using more? And the answer is because there's always a leak. There's always a guy who ran over the head with the tractor. And when does this thing go off? At 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning, where hopefully you're home, right? You're not looking at it. And that head goes off, and you're good at it. By the end of the week, you got it repaired. But it went off 5 days, and you have 2,000 heads, so there's another head that's leaking. Put a meter on the thing. At least you'll know about it. I don't know if you'll do anything. Next, cooling towers. I imagine most of you have cooling towers on your buildings. Who has a cooling tower? How do you control the height on that tower? Any idea? Anybody? Ball cock on the thing? Usually a cooling tower, there's two ways. You can have an electronic float, but most of them just have a float like you have in a toilet, a ball cock. Big piece of equipment, really simple. There's a ball. It floats on the water, it floats up, and then it stops. I go to towers, and they tell me everything's working. I go looking at the ball cock, and I see the ball has separated and is floating around. It's moving. I go, what's going on? And the water's pouring out. And they tell me, that's the way it's supposed to work. When we didn't have that, the building wasn't cold. It's unbelievable how often. So the super screws the ball back on. 2 weeks later, manager calls, you didn't do squat. I go there, the ball's floating again. Put a meter on it. You can also, in most municipalities, get a sewer credit for that, which means that you pay usually for water and sewer. If you're paying sewer as a multiple of water, well, that water's evaporating. Go tell your town, I don't want to pay for it. The towns may fight you on this, depends where you are, but it's an opportunity. But even without that, meter it. It's a potent. Water fountains. Everybody tells me, my water fountain's great, there's no problem. So I saw two things. I saw a building on Avenue Americas in New York. They got a new decorator. And he did the lobby over, and then he said, why don't we make the fountain, it only goes 40 feet up. Let's go 60. And you know what? It looks a lot better. But he was never there on a windy day. None of the water's coming back in the fountain. Now that it's 60 feet, the whole block is. The guy that had the hot dog stand now moved to, 50 feet on the other side. This damn thing's running. The other thing, I saw this in Rock Center. I don't know, they have a dozen fountains. Every single one is over the overflow. And it's not a lot. They got like a little hose coming in, not even a garden hose, but they're all going. All of them. They fixed them. I don't know what the number dropped because we're looking at about a $4 million water bill. But we see half the fountains we see, they're overflowing. So everybody, when they say it's not leaking, they say, I have a garage underneath and there's no water pouring into my garage. Yeah, there's no water pouring into your garage, but it's pouring down the drain and you may not notice it. Last but not least, my favorite, bill retail tenants. And I use the word retail. Anybody that you can bill in your building, get your problem on somebody else's lap. It's the easiest thing. If your lease allows you to bill them, and I will say 3 things about billing them. When you bill them, if you probably get, how many of you write the lease or involved in a lease? You are. You're the lucky one here. Most people we see, I'm a property manager, leasing gave me this nightmare. I got to live with it. But if you can, put in your lease that they do not get hot water from you. If they get hot water, put in that they have to pay 3 to 5 times because the BTUs in that water cost much more than the water. And you're going to say, no, I'll just write down they can't use my water. And they will, and then what do you do? Okay, you're going to slap them? They used your water. If it says they're paying you 5 times, man, they'll stop doing that. So that's 1. And 2, if you're going to hire somebody like me to read it, make sure they're paying those fees. Put that in your lease. So again, no hot water. If you use hot water, you pay extra for it. The fees to read it. I will say a caveat. Some states, especially Texas, don't like you adding fees to water bills. When you add a fee beyond passing on a cost, they decide you're a water utility. And then all of a sudden you're doing filings that'll make your head spin. But I would say I think most states will not give you a problem if you make a little money as long as it's in the lease. So speak to your attorney about that. Or call me and I'll tell you. So how are we going to read these meters? The simplest way is you have a BMS in your system and you connect to your BMS. Really simple. Problem. All these great guys downstairs that are selling BMSs and talking about it, you walk over and you say, can you read an encoded meter? And they give you a blank look. Without mentioning any of them, they go, huh? Encoded what? And they can't do it. So somehow you got to get this meter reading device to get the information into your BMS. So that's a con. It's hard to read. The great thing is you have ownership of the data. You as the building engineer or manager can look at it. You can look at your pump on the same dashboard. You can get frequent reads. If it's going to your BMS, you can get a read every second, depending on how, but you can get a lot of reads on it. And that's not, this is the wrong slide. I was supposed to be on this slide, right? That was this one. It goes to a BMS and then goes to that. You got to have a BMS. And you got to figure out how to connect it. If you want the pictures, I'll give you a holdout. I have a flyer, so you got everything. Or take as many as you want. If you got a BMS, you're going to probably need AC current, which is an expense. You're going to need internet access, maybe, high upfront costs. You got to connect into the, if you're a person like me and you got to connect into the building's BMS, all of a sudden they want security concerns up the gazoo. They don't want me touching their thing. And then they need a software platform to generate the bill. So there are downsides. Every building engineer wants this. This is the world they live in. It's expensive. I would say no. The other way is just get have the meters go to a transmitter. Transmitter goes to a collector, gets all the meters. If you have a lot of meters, this becomes very cheap. And then have that upload to the cloud via cell or internet or some other way. And I'll jump through this one. And last, this is the cheapest upfront way of doing it. And you can grab a Badger unit or something else and connect directly to your cell phone. You need nothing. All you need is a cell phone signal. If you're in a sub basement, you got to run 100 feet of line to outside. You can run it, we've done about 250 feet. Then we run into problems. So, really cheap, everything's uploaded. What's the downside? Well, you need, if you have 1 meter, it's not a problem. If you have a lot of meters, how well, most of this software that's out there is designed for a utility. So imagine they're thinking a homeowner, 1 meter, and they're not going to stack them. If you have 4 mains coming into your building, you want to know your total consumption. If today, and you shut 2 of those lines, well, the other 2 are going to double. 2 out of 4, they'll double, and if you have alarms connected, they're all going to go off. That's the problem with buying a utility grade thing, because it's designed for homeowner, 1 meter, that's what it's looking at. We try to stack everything and offer different options. I'm going backwards? No, okay. So, this is my 2-minute plug, if I can figure out how to make it work. I probably can't. Pardon?
Water. You can't live without it. And you can't run a business without paying for it. But is everyone paying their fair share? Unbelievably, in many buildings, water is now the 3rd largest expense, and fixed-rate tenant payments often fall short of actual water consumption, if you're billing them at all. In fact, many landlords have never billed their tenants for water. Maybe it's because meter reading eats up staff time with water meters that are not easily accessible and reads that are subject to human error. And let's not forget those undetected leaks, like that running toilet or leaking boiler. How do you quickly identify those before you're drowning in excessive water bills? Wouldn't it be great if there was a way to accurately read all your water meters automatically and have that information available at your fingertips in real-time, easy-to-read charts? Now there is. Introducing AquaSync, the automatic meter reading portal that saves you money, time, and headaches. It's the perfect solution for tenant billing, tracking consumption, and charting ROI for conservation projects. AquaSync eliminates the need for manual meter reads by recording hourly consumption and transmitting the data via cellular device directly to AquaSync's monitoring system. Ashokan's breakthrough cloud-based software automatically provides water meter consumption data, visible on any smartphone or computer, and accurate tenant bills that we generate for you. AquaSync works with all existing water meters and provides your tenants true transparency in water usage. An early warning system notifies you when water usage seems excessive, so you can identify any leaks before they become a problem. Best of all, plumbing engineers are available to identify any side issues. With AquaSync, you can identify water usage that seems out of the ordinary, provide real transparency to your tenants, and eliminate the need for manual or estimated meter readings forever. It's the next step in advanced water management.
I'm not supposed to do mention our company or anything. I'm not the only guy offering. You want something that does something along those lines. You want some portal that's going to handle all the meters and stack them up. Now, I failed to mention one thing, and I did it on purpose. You got all these sub-meters, you're reading them. How do you read the utility meter? If your utility, in many cases, your utility has an API and will feed you that data for free. Ask. Many of your utilities say, huh? You got a problem. You can probably read that meter. We've developed a splitter, is what we call it, which allows the meter read to come in, the line from the meter goes back out to the utility and comes to us without interfering with their signal. There are other people making, they're a little hard to get. So that's your real challenge. And your bigger challenge is dealing with the utility. Utilities are very, comfortable saying no to everything. If you're the big building in the town, maybe they'll talk to you, maybe not. But that's technologically, it's not a big challenge. But it could be a challenge as far as fighting with the town. In New York City, we've worked it out. We've worked it out in some other cities. We try not to have this conversation because the town right away says, oh, send me your documents, and 3 years later I'm having a conversation, and I want to do one town in Oshkosh, 1 meter that I'm charging the customer $300. I really don't want to have this conversation forever. But there is technology, so if your vendor's showing up and say, hey, you got 2 6-inch meters, you can't read those, they belong to the utility, I want you to put in 2 more 6-inch meters at $30,000 each. Technologically, you're not forced to do that. I get that through. You can really, we make these things, we're not selling them, but I think about $300 as opposed to a 6-inch meter, which is costing, I don't know, somewhere, just out of the box, it's costing you $6-7 grand. So that's the case. I just wanted to do some case studies that we've done. This building belongs to Google, Chelsea Market in New York. It's got 52 it's got a food court with 52 stores made up of 7 buildings, I think 1.2 million square feet, and then lots of office space. They wanted to know every single toilet, every single store. We've been reading this thing forever. Forever meaning 13 years. And all the meters are transmitting and they're all coming in. I think, shout out, I think most of the transmitters are Badger transmitters, and we're reading a dozen different types of meters in this building and been doing it since, I think, 2013. 55 Hudson Yards. This was an office building. They wanted to get lead points. The building, I looked it up, it's 1.5 million square feet, 51 stories. We put, during construction, so this is one of the few we did during construction, they put 2 meters on every floor. They have no tenants that have less than a half a floor. So we're reading all the tenants and billing them back. Challenge on this one, the tenants really use almost no water. It's a green lead building. I got tenants here using $100 a month and paying a rent bill that would blow your mind, $10 million a year for rent. And we're arguing. So we stopped calling them and telling them you're using $6 of extra water per day. And what we call and say, yesterday you went through 150 extra gallons. Oh, no. And they take care of it. As a result, the consumption in this building's nothing, because we know every single tenant space. And we developed a portal for the tenants. If you zoomed into those lines, there's endless lines stacked showing those tenants. The next one is Memorial Sloan Kettering, big research hospital, New York City, I think 8, 9 buildings. They were asked by New York City to reduce consumption. And we bid and lost a project to help them lower the consumption. But they came to us and said, all these other guys, these engineering firms that are going to do that, we don't know what we're really using today, and we don't know what we're using tomorrow, and we have no way to track it. We just like Aquasync to track these other guys' performance. The nice thing is those guys have finished their work 10 years ago. They keep using us. I will tell you the downside in hospitals, research centers. The building changes every day. Some guy, I walk in and he's got some research center, and tomorrow morning it's doing something different. And no one is telling a Nobel Prize winning doctor who's working on AIDS research or Ebola, no, you can't use the water you want. So yes, they track it every day, but if it goes up, they don't have the teeth to do anything about it. because it's not happening. We are reading the cooling towers, and that they're seeing big savings on. But on the overall buildings, we're not seeing. Mission Street, we're just reading, this is in San Francisco, we're reading just the retail. They have an Equinox gym, large gym, some other things. I think we're running out of time. This guy had a bunch of nursing homes, and he noticed that his nursing homes are using anywhere from $6 a bed, anywhere from $500 a bed to $3,000 per bed in water. So he said, I just need a chart that shows me for every city meter, how much am I using per bed yesterday? I want to be able to yell at somebody and look at this. This is the accountant. He doesn't want to solve any problem. He just wants to yell. But he wants to be able to say, consumption jumped. The other issue he had was his cooling tower was always running in the winter because he yelled at the managers to shut it, but they didn't. So he just wanted a chart with a temperature overlay, so we get it down in the winter, there's no consumption. He wants to see it down. Very simple. And that's it. That's who we work with. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever dealt with data centers?
Yes. The problem with data centers is no one there. They want the thing freezing cold. What's your concern?
They use a ton amount of water.
Right.
If they waste a lot of water.
We're dealing with one now in New York. The building's trying to get a lead. The data center belongs to Verizon. It's not a data center. It's circuitry for Verizon for their switches. And they've got, lead. When you apply for lead, you get 2 questions. How many people are in the building? So you should use X water. And I say, there's no one in there. There's 15 people and they've got 700,000. Well, then there should be no water used. And it's a data center. So we have done it and we've caught consumption, but we haven't gotten involved in reducing it. And it's hard. I'm doing Google and Verizon we're looking at. So they're doing something with the data because we see when there's a leak, they catch it and they resolve it. They don't let me in. They don't want me, crawling around their equipment. Though Verizon did say to come back next week and figure it out. I don't know. So, other questions? But it's easy. Data centers usually have one line coming in. And the way to convince them to do it is tell them, when that line breaks, you want to know about it before it floods out your data center. That's their nightmare fear. To be honest, it won't help. Because most of this stuff will tell you an hour later that you had a leak. And they want to know, 2 seconds later. Any other questions? I'll be around. If you have any questions about water meters, my business cards are here. You can give me a shout. I like to talk about plumbing, so anything to do with that. Thank you.